Hey, listeners. Today we are meeting with Dr. David McMillan, and he has 40 plus years of experience as a clinical psychologist. He gives us some amazing tips on how to improve our marriages and even our parenting. Stay tuned for this incredible episode. Hey parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self-care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important, unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's walk and talk. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have Dr. David McMillan here with us as a guest, and I am so excited to have you on here today just to pick your brain a little bit because you reached out to me. You said you're a clinical psychologist with about 40 of experience and you are an author. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. And do you prefer to go by Dave or David, or what's your preference?
David's fine.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind. We want to know all about your story and your journey, especially as far as authoring and your experiences as a psychologist.
I think my greatest credential is my marriage to my wife
I love
for
that.
38 years or so. Yeah. And also my failures, 2 divorces, which have taught me a lot about the pain that relationship can create and the failures that we can make in relationship. But yeah, I'm a PhD and I got all the credentials to be a clinical psychologist and Vanderbilt and an internship at Stanford and all that stuff. And I'm on the faculty at Fisk University, which is an HBCU school. And 40 years. I got a lot. Yeah, and I published some articles. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. That's quite the resume. And that's surprising to me too. So 38 years you've been married and you were divorced. So were those first marriages pretty short? Because 38 years just in marriage alone is pretty significant. So you've kind of done.
Yes, it's very significant. I'm very proud of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. I appreciate you noting that. Yes. It's an achievement, but mainly it's her achievement. She's done a good job of putting up with me. That's not easy.
So do you do clinical work? Like, do you work with clients, or are you doing more writing, or what are you doing at this point?
I work with couples and work on sometimes court cases and to help families get through divorces without too much damage.
I imagine that's quite a challenging job.
Yeah, it can be.
Especially when you involve courts and children. It gets pretty sticky.
Yes, it does.
If you wouldn't mind, tell me a little bit about some of the books that you've authored. Like you mentioned to me, Create Your Own Love Story. Can you tell us a little bit about that one? I don't know if that's your favorite or what, but can you share?
It's my first. I guess it's in some ways a favorite of mine. Yeah. So before I wrote that book, I wrote a theory of sense of community. And that theory is the most cited theory in the field of community psychology. And basically, it describes and defines the glue that brings a community together. And that same glue is what is the definition of love, same thing. So I use the four elements of sense of community to find love. And then I put that in this book. Here it is. Create Your Own Love Story.
I love it.
And and people can read that and how to diagnose their relationship and how to know what needs fixing and what they can do to fix it. So,
Do you mind if I ask what those four stages, or what did you call them? Those four needs or
elements.
elements? Yeah.
Elements. Well, there are four elements. Each of them have about six sub-elements. The first element has to do with boundaries and belonging and membership and connection. That element. To have such an element, you have to have a line that says people on this side of the line don't belong. People on this side do belong. And that's what a wedding ring symbolizes. It symbolizes the line. You have to be able to expect to belong when you show up, that you're valued and welcomed and wanted. You have to be willing to pay the price of admission and to sacrifice. And that leads us to the second element, which has to do with influence and power and trust and how you build trust. It's about mattering. You matter to me. You have a trump card. And when you play it, I jump. And when I play mine, you do as well. And this is norms and rules and expectations. You got to know what your partner is going to do or you can't dance. It's important that you be able to know in advance. So that's why we drive on the right side of the road, so that everybody can drive on the right side of the road, and it works. We follow some expectations. This is government, really. While the first element is spiritual and of a sense of belonging, the second element is government, how you decide things. Where's the power?
Mm-hmm.
The third element is about trade. And there are four kinds of trades. One is consensual trading, and that's where everybody begins there. You have a sweater on, I see. I do too. That's something we have in common. And then you look for other things that you have in common, and that sort of begins to help you bond. It's this agreement. It serves to inflate your ego. Oh, you're like me. I'm like you. We're together. We're same. I'm not crazy, because if I'm crazy, you're crazy, because we all, So, hey, yeah, we're together. We both know where we were when first man landed on the moon, except you were in the womb, I'm pretty sure. So,
I actually don't remember. I was young enough.
So that's consensus trading, but consensus trading is sort of boring and it doesn't add value. Wealth comes from complementary trading. You have a line, I have a pole, and so we can catch a fish. So we can create a third thing. That's basically how children are conceived, is that we have something we can give each other that we don't have before without the other person. So couples oftentimes complain that we're just grown apart. We don't value the same things anymore. Well, you didn't value the same things when you got together because you valued the differences. And it was the differences that added value and made wealth. And now you're complaining because you're different. Well, you've always been different. And that's once upon a time was a good thing, and now it's a bad thing. That's sad that you're not able to appreciate that the other person has something that's not like you, and it's a good thing. So that's complementary trading. And then there's transforming trade, which is somebody comes to see me, pays me money. That's my part of the trade. I get that money. And they hope that seeing me, they'll learn something about how to be better. And they leave after working with me a better person. That's supposedly what's supposed to happen. That's why you go to school. And couples surely have something to teach each other, something that they didn't know. My wife is a homemade cook, and I can chop an onion because of her. She's taught me how to be a sous chef. So, I'm pretty good we're a good team. So that's transformative trading.
Right.
Then there's generative trading, which is helping the next generation figure out how to make Thanksgiving dressing. So your mom teaches you how to make the dressing that's been in her family for years, and you carry that tradition on, and that's generative trading. So those are the four, that's three elements. Remember, the first is spiritual, the second one is government, the third is economy, trade. Now, the fourth is art. And art involves a story. It's about your relationship and its story. People will certainly ask you when they're talking to you and your mate about how did you meet? They want to know the story. And that story is your art. That story is what creates rituals and symbols and traditions and becomes culture so that your own family builds its own way of being, its own cultural life around the story. And the story needs to honor its participants. If it humiliates each other, you get divorced. But if it brings honor to you both, which is hopefully what it does, then you have something to be proud of and show off, and you have symbols. And if you look around the room, there are things that are my wife and I have brought back from our travels, or have a picture of something, something that creates a memory for us and symbolizes those memories. And every couple has a version of that collection, their art.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the four elements.
I love that. So this is all part of your book, Create Your Own Love Story?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And so when people read this, I'm just kind of curious. I don't know if you know this, but I'm a therapist as well. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a counselor. So in that, like, we do a lot of emotionally focused therapy. We do Gottman method, different things with couples. Is this something that couples that come to you that you would recommend? Like, this is something that will help you if you read it as a couple to grow closer.
Yeah. Yes. Well, EFT is, that I think of myself as a humanist and an EFT kind of person. So yes, it fits right into that, as does this book, Emotion Rituals.
Okay.
And it's an EFT book about how to manage emotions so that they don't manage you. Usually when we don't master our emotions happen to us, and we feel like we're their victim, and they direct us, but we can be masters. You can build your own emotional intelligence if you understand how emotions work. And so that's what this book is. It's about the fact that emotions flow. Emotions are like waves. They come and they go, and they come and they go. And that's so important for you to remember, for all of us to remember, when we're in really, really deep down dark times. This too shall pass, because that's what emotions do, pass.
Right.
When we try not to feel something, they don't pass, they stay. If we allow ourselves to feel them, they pass. And basically, therapy is the processing of emotions. So somebody comes to talk to you and they tell you how they feel. And as soon as they start talking about how they feel, then they feel something else, because emotions move once they're processed. But when they get stuck, which they often do, and they can't be expressed or talked about, then you get trapped in an emotional hole. And this is about how to get out of those holes.
Right. And this is another book that you wrote then? Emotion Rituals?
Emotion Rituals. I see it.
I love that. So how many books have you written?
Well, these are the two that are published. I've probably written about 10. I just finished 2 that I hope to publish. This will be interesting to you. Gregory Bateson really is the father of systems theory, right? And family therapy systems.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Margaret Mead developed most of their ideas while they were married and studying headhunters in New Guinea who were walking around killing people, believing that their misfortune was because they hadn't drunk enough human blood. And that's who they were studying. Wow. Anyway, they were an amazing couple, brilliant people, wonderful, wonderful human beings. And in their studies of anthropology, both in New Guinea and in Bali, they came up with most of the ideas that are the basis of family systems theory. But, Bateson didn't believe that they should be applied to families, because he only had one major natural law. He was looking for natural laws. And it was homeostasis, which is an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, karma. It's basically what is the worst of us. If I hit you, I hit you back. And if you blind my eye, if you poke me in the eye, I poke you in the eye back. And so what we have is two blind people when we do that. That's just not our best self, but it is predictable. It is what we do. His students began to want to apply this to families in spite of the fact that he said, no, we don't have enough laws. And they did. Ultimately, they wrecked family therapy, which is a great idea that, people really are in a context and in a family, and the family system usually is in trouble, not just a person. I mean, that's a great idea and a great useful process. But when you say that I hit you because you didn't have supper on the table, and therefore I'm justified in hitting you because that's balance, that's homeostasis, that's the law, then that ends up that family therapy begins justifying family violence. People begin blaming mothers for schizophrenia. The schizophrenic mother, you've heard of that, I'm sure. And that's just not right. I mean, it's just so many people have abandoned it or won't even touch seeing a family. And that's too bad because that's a really helpful approach. And what's needed is more than one law. So these two books are about more laws, more natural laws. So
both of your books, you mean?
The two new books that are coming out,
Okay.
They're about the natural laws. And I offer 12 natural laws that apply to human relationships. I call them alchemical natural laws, but really they come right out of science. They're quantum physics, they're biology, they're theoretical physics, they're chemistry. All these scientific disciplines have laws of nature that they've discovered, and those laws are metaphors for how we can treat each other. For example, in chemistry, you learn about catalysts. Well, that applies to people. Sometimes when you have two people together, they just don't mesh, and then you put something else there, and all of a sudden that catalyst makes the mesh, even though the catalyst doesn't, because it creates the atmosphere for the connection. Also, chemical law is that you need recipes to put elements together. So if you're trying to make a new compound, you need to follow exact time and amount and heat and all that stuff precisely in order to make something new. And that's true of relationships. You have to follow recipes. There are ways to do things that work and ways that don't.
Yeah. Do you work primarily with couples?
I see right now I do. In my life, I've had periods of times when I work with mostly individuals, but over time, I think because I've written about couples and that I've become known for that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like all of your books so far really have been about relationships. Is that right?
Well, this one's not.
Oh, okay. Emotion, rituals is not.
This could be used individually with people.
Okay. So my listeners are mostly couples, parents. If you were to give them, I mean, we're talking 40 years of experience here that you've had, and almost in your 38 years being married. So twofold here, a lot of experience helping couples and in your own relationship and learning from, you even said those 2 divorces. You've written so many things. I don't know if you can condense this down enough, but what are some little tidbits you can share with the listeners today on simple ways they can start improving their marriage now?
Well, just think about the laws of motion and the two Newtonian laws, the law of motion and the law of homeostasis. So we have our relationships have a momentum and they can start going down. But one of the things we know is that for every action, there is a reaction, which is the law of homeostasis. So if I insult you, you'll insult me back. But given that you know that these laws are like this, you can also compliment you and then I think that picture behind you really works. That's a great picture. The clouds and the ocean, and it's beautiful. And it frames you very, very well. So now I've just started a new momentum, haven't I? And so often for every action, there's a reaction. You'll look at my sweater and say, yeah, that's a nice sweater you got. And I really like your house. And then I'll say, well, I wish I had your hair. Boy, that's beautiful hair. And I think it frames your face perfectly and it really makes you look beautiful. And then you say, well, you're not chopped liver yourself, and you just keeps on going in that direction because you know the laws. So if you want to change the momentum of your relationship, just stop responding in kind. Now that takes ego strength. It takes ego strength. Most of us don't have that. Most of us are like children going, yeah, 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 yeah. But it takes great courage to stop that momentum and turn it around. And that means death to the ego. The ego's got to die. You can't have a good relationship if you serve your ego. So in my book, I think I say this in Create Your Own Love Story. I'm not sure I do. But anyway, no, I don't. It's in the next book. 1 + 1 = 3. So you got one person and you got another person, but you also have an atmosphere around them, a spirit. You can see it when you go to restaurants to eat and you look at couples and there's a spirit around them. You can see some couples that are just sort of robot eating together, and you can see other couples that are holding hands and are looking in each other's eyes, but there's a spirit around them. You can just see it. And the job of a couple is never, never to serve yourself, of course, and never to serve the other person. The job is to always serve the third thing, the spirit. Whatever it is you do, you should do it because it makes the spirit better, whatever that is. And it won't be something you will want because you won't want to do it a lot. But if it serves the spirit, that's what you should do.
I love that. And just talking about that ego strength, I do have a follow-up question, if you wouldn't mind. That 1 + 1 = 3, and just follow the spirit. What?
Serve the spirit, yeah.
Serve the spirit. I love that aspect of it. What about like a client that might come to you and say, I kill my ego, that there won't be like the sense of self left. Like I will just be a pushover and somebody that doesn't like have a voice. Like I'll lose who I am if I'm always giving in and being steamrolled.
Yeah. You were taught this as a beginning counselor. Empathy does not mean that you agree. Listening and giving somebody power and letting their words matter to you. Yes, let them influence you, but that you don't want to lose yourself. You want to hold on to yourself, but you don't ever lose yourself if you just listen and caring, telling someone, those words make sense to me. You're not crazy for thinking that way. Does not mean you agree with them or that you're going to do what they say. It just means they're not crazy and you understand them and they make sense.
Right.
And so you can do that, empower somebody's words, and then you can ask them, well, will you listen to me and see that I might have something that you haven't considered before? And hopefully, remember, this is that tit for tat thing. If you listen to them, they'll listen to you. It's that momentum thing. And if they won't do that, if they insist on you thinking the way they think, then, better get the hell out of there. It's not a good relationship.
Yeah. And this often you grow into this over time, the more that safety and security is there and you feel like there is that validation and that love. But it sounds like really focusing what you're saying is just on letting that pride go, letting that ego go, and doing that give and take with that validation. Am I understanding?
Yeah, having your way is not what a relationship's about. It's just not. There's a book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And he does a beautiful job of describing the death of the ego and how that happens and how important it is that you dance with fate. Whatever fate brings you, it's not something you can control. Fate can't be controlled. And instead of trying to control the world and the other people, let fate dance with you and co-create with your partner and with fate. And stop trying to have your way and begin to listen and understand and take in and then offer and then do this. And life is so much better and so much easier. It's that what's that guy's name? I can never pronounce his name, but he's the guy who talked about the flow. So a Polish name is this.
Yeah, it's a very long one. I love learning about flow, but I can't pronounce it either, and I don't even remember it actually.
Oh, it's such a really wonderful idea, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I've spoken to it before with a guest so that they understand the concept of flow.
Well, you practice something 10,000 times,
Mhm.
and then once you practice it 10,000 times, you just can relax and allow it. And all of a sudden, you get in the flow, and then Michael Jordan can't miss a basket. He's in the flow.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing. And that's what we can do in relationships. We invite the dance with the spirit and with fate. And all of a sudden, without trying to control it, because when you try, that's when you can't, the flow is screwed up. It's when you relax and allow and participate and imagine and play, then the flow comes to you and you're blessed and you're in grace. And it's just this wonderful moment. And yes, it won't last. but but the more you dance with it, the more you learn the surrender thing and begin to let yourself and fate be partners, the easier it gets.
Oh, I love that. I've actually never thought about flow in the sense of a relationship, like a marriage. I don't know why my brain never went there, but that's really insightful, I feel like. Not trying
It's,
to control, but to relax.
yeah, it's like fate is the music.
Mhm.
Okay, you got fate coming at you both as partners. That's the music. And then as partners, you learn how to dance together co-creatively,
Mm.
each one of you playing the roles that you practice so well. And all of a sudden, you're dancing to the music, and that is flow.
Yeah.
And the more you practice that, the better you are at playing with fate.
Right. And stepping out, well, talking about EFT again, stepping out of that dysfunctional pattern, that dysfunctional dance without that harmony, and into something else where it's just beautiful and effortless. It reminds me again of what you said of not trying to control it, but just letting go and that
Right.
peacefulness that comes. Oh, I just love that.
Right. And as you know,
Mhm.
you can't tell somebody to stop doing something. That won't work because you're telling them something in their unconscious. Here's you tell them what it is, and your unconscious doesn't know a negative.
Right.
So you have to help somebody see something they can do instead. And once you give them a better habit and another way of doing something, and they practice that a little bit, well, it's like gripping your tennis racket differently.
Mhm.
And so you change your grip, and yeah, it's awkward, and you can't do anything. All of a sudden, though, after you practice it, it's amazing what you are able to do. Now you have this new grip that really works at certain shots, and it's so much fun because you have practiced it and you've grown more than you were because you've allowed yourself to be influenced and fate has given you a challenge and you've accepted it.
That's
Hit a
amazing.
top spin forehand. You got to grip the racket different.
That just goes exactly into parenting too. Same kind of concepts can apply to parenting. You can't force them or that negative that you talked about. Instead, switching that to showing
Children,
them what they can do.
children are not going to mature until they mature. You can't
Mm.
snap your fingers and punish a child and scare them to death and get them to behave. That just won't work.
Right.
Uh, when I was a little boy, my parents used to punish me when I didn't go down, when I'd get up from a nap and sneak outside. And I'm sorry, I just could not hear the noise of the children playing outside and stay in bed. I just could not do it. And they could punish me till hell freezes over, and it wasn't going to work. They could have just nailed the window shut
Yeah.
and didn't want to do that because they thought there might be a fire and what. So anyway, I just grew out of that. What the punishment didn't get me to do that. You can only say to a child, I am not for that. That is not what I represent. These are not my values, and I'm disappointed in you. But I'm not disappointed in you as a whole because you as a whole is beautiful. You are a lovely, wonderful, wonderful child, somebody who I love and value so much. But that behavior, not so much. I don't think that defines you. And I'm not for that. And that's the main thing you need to say. A consequence just needs to make the statement. It doesn't need to get a pound of flesh. because a pound of flesh will only teach a child to be afraid. It won't teach a child how to have values.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. Both of those things. Like, I love how you brought in parenting to it as well. But just kind of in summary of what you said. So you've talked about 2 books specifically. You talked about Create Your Own Love Story and Emotion Rituals. And then you'll have 2 that will be coming out too.
Yeah.
If you were to give like a little takeaway or a final thought for our listeners today about those things, what would they gain from reading those and how would that improve their relationships?
I'm a country boy and I like to think things are simple, and I like for things to be simple, and I like for things to be intuitive. And I don't really want to challenge myself to grow and change because it's so really hard. If you get to work on your relationship and you add some tools to it, like if you add more ways of thinking than just 1 or 2 ways of thinking, if you have only one natural law like homeostasis, it's just not enough. So you have to be open to learning different things, like the laws of quantum physics or about humility. You have to understand the law of relativity, which means that everybody sees things differently. And you have to make room for other people's ways of thinking and respect their ways of thinking as much as you respect your own. And that means you have to be humble. You have to not know. You have to wonder. You have to be curious. The law of probabilities, another quantum physics law, means that nothing is ever certain. Nothing is ever certain. So you don't know. So coming to terms with curiosity and not knowing and making room always for other people, because being curious and open and not knowing never ends a conversation with a period. It always ends a conversation with a question mark. And that always creates room for other people and includes them in your conversations.
Oh, I love that. I've never thought about that either. And your conversations with a question mark, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful.
The British do that all the time.
Tell us where we can find you and where we can find your books so they can go and check them out and listen to them.
Well, I have a website, drdavidmcmillan.com. My 2 new books are looking for an agent and a publisher. So agent and publishers listening, please get in contact with me. Be delighted to have you publish my book. And the other 2 books are listed on my website, as well as books about parenting. I have a book about overeating. I have a book, I think my eating disorder book is up there. I don't think that's up there yet. I got books about anger management, about anxiety, I forget all the things. I have some articles about divorcing parents and how to help divorcing parents, about children that are alienated from a parent and how to help that parent and reconcile and regroup. And my claim to fame is sense of community. Anybody who wants to know about community psychology and sense of community, there are a whole bunch of sense of community articles on there. They've been read over 50,000 times a year. People read that article. So it's a big deal.
That's incredible. I think that's what happens when you're proactive and you have 40 plus years of experience. So it sounds like they can find a lot of things on your website. And what was that website one more time?
drdavidmcmillan.com.
drdavidmcmillan.com. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I appreciate you sharing these insights, especially about marriage, but also about parenting that can help us. And just that last little thing I want to say, end your conversations with a question mark. And I think my takeaways from what you're saying, let that ego die. That 1 + 1 = 3. I just love this. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, you were listening. You were a good interviewer. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you take care, and we will definitely go to your website and check that out. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.